Okay, it's a Honda P50 motorcycle or moped autocycle tank, and look inside. Let's see if we can make that out with the light, but basically it's very rusty inside, not very nice at all. So the trick here this evening is to start off the electro passivation process. So I've started making the electrode, which is basically a piece of half-inch bar with a bunch of holes in it to increase the surface area, and I'm just about to solder on the wire. Now you see I've passed the wire through and tied a knot. Sometimes the copper dissolves and you lose grip, and I want to be able to get this out and not leave it inside the tank, so I've tied a knot. The plastic won't burn away, so I'll be able to lift this out when the passivation is complete. So stage one, get on with the soldering and getting the electrodes together. Okay, what we've done now is I've soldered up the electrode. So that's the wires connected to it now, and it's looking pretty good. I'll just stop that beeping there, I'll explain that in a second. So that's pretty solid now. Now I've put these rings on it, and that's just a piece of garden hose. It's been cut into rings, and the idea is that when this goes inside the tank, it's not going to touch the sides of the tank when it's resting inside, so it'll keep it insulated from the tank. Connected up the electrode to positive and connected the tank to negative, and this check here is basically to make sure that the tank itself is actually, just make sure I'm just resting that. I'm doing this one-handed, so it's not easy. To make sure that we have a circuit. So I know that the tank is connected to the negative on the power supply, which is great. Use my handy multimeter, and the power supply itself will be set to 12 volts. That's all it takes. If you don't have a power supply, use a car charger, just as good, works nicely, bangs out a current. It's a fairly low current that it draws. It'll pick up about 2.5 amps at the start, and then it'll settle down to about 1/4 amp, and then you just leave that overnight. So the next stage is to take the tank, fill it up with water. It's a bit counterintuitive, and some handy baking soda, which I have on my shelf. There we go, washing soda. Sorry, not baking soda, washing soda, just like you get at the supermarket. 80 pence, fabulous stuff. Does the job nicely. So that's going to go on to into the solution. I'll put in a good handful, cup, into there to get a fairly strong solution, and then we'll put the electrodes in and we'll switch it on and we'll see what we get. Alright, back in a second. Right, that's the tank full. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go and put the electrode into the tank. Nothing's switched on at the moment. And that's it in the tank. I'm going to move that along a little bit to the right. As middle as I can for the tank. Doesn't matter too much. My interpretation of electropassivation is that it goes line of sight from the rust on the tank to the electrode, pretty much in straight lines. So if you've got included dimples like this, or like my GS where you've got split tanks, then you might need to use more electrodes or do more operations. I found there's an analogy between more electrodes and more current being taken. So now we're set up. I've checked the earth again, so the earth line is on. Going back to the power supply, positive lines in. Fortunately, the advantage of using a power supply is that it shouldn't blow up, so let's just switch on and find out. So there we go. We're drawing just over 1 amp at 13.8 volts. So that's about spot on, actually. That's pretty good. What's happening inside there, we'll not see anything at the moment, but in a little while we'll start seeing some bubbles coming up, and those bubbles will be the gases coming off. Now, word of caution, don't, whatever you do this inside an enclosed space like a garage. always do this outside where there's plenty of fresh air and stuff like that, because the gas that comes off is hydrogen, and in health and safety land, hydrogen collects in a little pool and doesn't disperse using Brownian motion, and will become highly explosive. Don't walk in here smoking a cigarette and poking your face in, because it'll blow up in your chops. But yeah, that's now doing its job. So the rust that was on there is now slowly coming off. The current's sitting, it's come up a little bit now. It's come up to about 2 amps. That's a good sign. In fact, it's rising as we watch, which is a good sign. It'll peak in a little bit, but that's basically starting to electrolyse the contents in there. It means it's actually doing some work, and in another couple of minutes we might actually see some bubbles. Right, so I'm going to leave this to it now. I'll come back and take some more footage, and what will happen is when I take that stick out, it should look like a stick rather than a piece of metal. I'll have lots of rust on it. It'll look pretty horrible. I'll clean it off. I'll take off the rings. I'll clean it off with a grinder. I'll put the rings back on. I'll stick it back in again for more. But the magic and hard work is being done by the power supply here. Now, just to let you know, most people set things up, try them, and then take it all apart and then redo it for video. That was me genuinely switching it on for the first time. I've done this process enough times now that I know pretty much what it's meant to be doing. And that's a hell of a lot easier than filling your tank with gravel and shaking it about, or spending lots of money on expensive chemicals. If you've got a garage and you've got a battery charger, you've already got the kit to do this job. Okay, more later. Right, it's about 10 minutes later, as little as that. I've already had the electrode out and it's already covered in rust, so I've put it back in again. You can see what's happening here. You can see the bubbles forming, which will be hydrogen bubbles coming off. Fairly foul looking stuff there. Also, you have a leak, which is good. So we now know possibly why the bike was abandoned. I think it was last taxed in 1986, and there's a leak just around the joint on the fuel tank, which would, if that was fuel, that's quite a dangerous amount of fuel, but we'll get that blocked up as well and get that sealed properly. You can see there's been a kind of a rudimentary repair there. They've put on some kind of composite onto it. I don't think it's sealed particularly well, and I think just get that right for you. Yeah, just under there it's leaking, so not particularly good, but we'll get all that sealed up as well as part of this process. But the first thing to do is to get the rust out of it. And you see the power supply still taking just about half an amp, and the wee cooling fan's running, so it is working. That's about, what, half an amp, 13 volts, 7 watts, give or take. So it's not a very high power process, and it's certainly a lot more gentle than putting gravel in and shaking it, or attaching it to a cement mixer. So, more in a wee bit. So, about 5 minutes later, not drying a huge amount. The drip has actually slowed up, which makes me think that stuff's just expanding, and there's a nice, you see that brown gunk coming off there, and that's just the rust dissolving and blowing away. So let's go and take a look at this electrode. First things first, switch off the power supply. Lights are off, that's good, because you'll short it as you take it out, pretty much guaranteed. So let's see what this wee stick here looks like. Let's see what we've got just after 10 minutes. Right, well there you go. That was a shiny electrode that went in, and I don't know how much you can make out there, but that's kind of flakes of fairly disgusting rust and goop all over it. So what I'm going to go and do is I'm going to pull off these rings, give it a wash, and stick it back in. Right, as you'll remember, the electrode was nice and bright and shiny when you put it in. That's me taking it out and giving it a wee wash, and you can see it's already got signs of corrosion on the electrode, and the water that's come off is fairly rusty. It's full of sort of gritty bits of of rust and just nastiness really. So I'm going to put these rings back on and stick it back in again. Right, that's it back in. Haven't switched it on just yet. I don't know if you can make out my fingers, but you can already see this sort of rusty kind of discoloration that's come off. It's fairly foul stuff, and you can see the build up around the top there. Fairly nasty rust bits. So let's switch it on again, see what we get. Right, shot back up to just under 2 amps, and what will happen is that it's now working away again, doing fine. It'll have instantly attracted pieces of loose material directly to it, and it will start to electrolyze again, and we'll start getting more of this really nasty brown foam appearing. To get little signs of it, just tiny little micro bubbles coming up. Don't know if you can make that out in the camera, but working away. And there's a smell, a strong smell like farmyard rust and soap coming up. It's not unpleasant, but it's not insubstantial. Right, leave it to it.